When the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt was opened for the first time last week, foreign workers were able to leave. Of course, Palestinians weren't. They are still trapped in Gaza. But some of those who were able to get out are now telling their stories. Emily Callahan is a nurse for Doctors Without Borders and had been working as a nurse in Gaza for 26 days before she was evacuated to the US. Here she is speaking to CNN.
We were relocated about 5 times over the course of 26 days due to security concerns. And one of the places we wound up was the Khan Yunis training center. We call it KYTC.
That's when people had evacuated to the south. So you were in the south of Gaza at that point.
Yes, when we went to below Wadi Gaza line. And there were, by the time we left there were 35,000 internally displaced people living alongside us. There were children with just massive burns down their faces, down their necks, all over their limbs. And because the hospitals are so overwhelmed, they are being discharged immediately after. And they're being discharged to these camps with no access to running water. There's 50,000 people at that camp now and 4 toilets. They're given 2 hours of water every 12 hours.
There's 4 toilets for 50,000 people.
Yes. And that's where we were living too. And they have these fresh, open burns and wounds and partial amputations that are just walking around these conditions. And parents are bringing their children to us going, please, can you help? Please, can you help? And we have no supplies.
Just sounds like hell, right? And again, this is not a natural disaster. It wasn't that an earthquake happened. What has happened is that one of the world's superpowers, one of the closest allies to the United States and the United Kingdom, is dropping thousands and thousands of bombs on a densely populated area and blocking supplies of water, food, and electricity. And what happens when you do that? Oh, yes, you get tens of thousands of people, many of them with severe burns, as she was talking about, many of them with partial amputations, as she was talking about, sharing 4 toilets without running water, right? This is just a hell on earth which is being created by our ally, and people from all political parties, or from Labour and Tories at least, are going out and saying, yep, more of this, yeah, more of this. A ceasefire, that would be a terrible thing to do. We need more of this because otherwise we're not going to be able to defeat Hamas. So sorry about those 50,000 people sharing 4 toilets, constantly worrying that their family members are going to get bombed, constantly worrying that they're going to get bombed. Because remember, being on a refugee camp doesn't stop you getting bombed in Gaza right now, right? But that's all fine and dandy, according to so many people in the West. Thank God we have nurses like Callahan on CNN sort of telling the truth about this. Callahan, so the nurse there, also talked about the support she received from Palestinian staff working for Médecins Sans Frontières.
They were standing between us and desperate people. They made sure that they were talking to every official that they could find, trying to push us through, trying to get us on the bus, trying to get us out. And we're standing there and we're watching these incredible men who have sacrificed everything for us, who have sacrificed time with their families, their own physical safety, their own water supply they were giving to us. And we're watching them fight to get us across the border, knowing that we were not bringing them with us. And they didn't waver. Ibrahim was right in the front with our passports, fighting so hard to get us on. And we get to Arish that night and find out his parents are dead. They were losing family members and friends.
You said if it wasn't for your national staff, you think you would have been killed by people who were just desperate.
We either would have starved to death or run out of water. They were the ones that negotiated all of that. Gaza's a small city, so everyone knows everyone, and they would call in favors and call their friends and say, who do you know that has food? Who do you know that's open? Where can we get this? And they would drive all over the place to find water. And when we ran out of bottled water in Gaza, they were the ones that were able to figure out that the water truck was coming here at these times. And, oh, I know this guy has a grocery store and they still have power. So I think I can probably get something from them. Like when I say we would have starved to death without them, I'm not exaggerating.
Good answer to a very loaded question. Because you notice there, Anderson Cooper said, so you wouldn't have survived? Is that because people were so angry and trying to kill you? Now, in the full interview, you can go watch it online. It's worth the full 8 minutes. She does say that actually they were victims of aggression from people who were feeling very desperate and thinking that, they're Americans, you're supporting this war, who are lashing out because it's, a desperate time there, right? But I mean, Anderson Cooper there seemed to be saying, oh, and this is so dangerous. The real danger in Gaza is the angry Palestinians. And she's saying, no, when I say my life was at risk, I mean there was no food, there was no water, mean, obviously there were bombs dropping everywhere as well, right? I think also important to note, and we keep saying this, the number of people who are getting killed in Gaza right now means that anyone who knows anyone Gazan knows people who are just dying, day after day, right? So she's saying it just so happened that one person who was working for her, who she says was acting so bravely and helping them get across the border, even knowing they wouldn't be allowed across the border, right? So you're helping people escape this living hell that you're in, but you're doing it with dignity and grace. That person, his parents have been killed just the day before, right? Every time someone says, oh, we don't need a ceasefire right now, that's hundreds more people, hundreds more parents, kids, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, people with dreams who are being killed by this sort of rain of bombs and hell sort of just falling from the sky. And anyone who sort of doubts the death toll, I mean, we've done a specific video about how, the death toll from the Gaza Ministry of Health nearly always matches up, or has always matched up, to sort of UN statistics and even Israeli statistics at the end of these wars. But just the number of people who have a friend who's died, have 20 family members who've died, right? They are clearly killing a large proportion of Gazans. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the case that everyone knows someone who lost someone last night, right? It's constant. You follow Palestinian people on Twitter, it's just constant, the number of people who are dying. Again, really moving testimony. It sounds so horrible. I can't, it's difficult to imagine being there, right? And that perhaps made this next answer surprising.
Would you go back to Gaza?
In a heartbeat. In an absolute heartbeat. My heart is in Gaza. It will stay in Gaza. The Palestinian people that I worked with, both our national staff in the office as well as my staff at Indonesia Hospital, were some of the most incredible people I've ever met in my life. When everything went off and we got the notice to move south of Wadi Gaza, I was texting my nurses at Indonesia Hospital, and I said, we lost a nurse weekend one. He was killed when the ambulance outside the hospital was blown up. And I was texting them when we got the evacuation orders, and I said, did any of you move south? Did any of you get out? Are any of you coming down this way? And the only answer I got was, this is our community. This is our family. These are our friends. If they're going to kill us, we're going to die saving as many people as we can. And I said, if I can ever have an ounce of the heart that you have, I will die a happy person. They were incredible. I would like to send out a reminder that there are civilians seeking shelter there, and that my doctors and nurses didn't leave out of loyalty to their community. And I know that there is an idea being pushed right now that anyone that stayed behind is going to be considered some kind of a threat. And I want to remind people that the people that stayed behind are heroes. The people that stayed behind are they know they're going to die, and they're choosing to stay behind anyway.
It's so powerfully put. I mean, there were lots of people sort of, I think, rightly saying, oh, it's a shame that it has to be this white lady who sort of gives this message to America. And if they were Palestinian, I'm sure Anderson Cooper would have asked them to condemn Hamas, and that would have taken up half the interview. But nonetheless, Rivka, I mean, that was an incredibly powerful testimony there.
Yeah. I think that I totally get that frustration that why does it have to be Emily Callahan rather than, a Palestinian or, someone who isn't a blonde white lady saying this. But I think there's also an important pragmatism here, which is that Emily Callahan has recognized that she's effectively infiltrated the CNN studio. CNN has been singled out by Palestinians and their supporters as being one of the most sort of pro-Israel and sort of partial and biased platforms, in America in its coverage of this war, to the extent that, a video went viral recently of its chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward, being confronted by a Palestinian in Gaza, I believe, saying, why are you doing this? Emily Callahan is well aware of the media environment that she's entering and the kind of questions that she's likely to be asked and the framing that's likely to be given. And she's also aware that her position in Médecins Sans Frontières means that she can't say anything that's explicitly taking a side in the conflict. But she does something really brilliant, which is that she recognizes that they're not going to think that I'm a threat. And they're also not going to allow me to say anything that's explicitly pro-Palestinian. So what I'm instead going to do is just humanize the people that I worked with, because coming from me, it's going to be taken immensely more seriously. And saying that they're humans rather than that, their political cause is just or justified or the resistance is legitimate or anything is really difficult to argue with. It's impossible to argue with the profound emotional connection that someone who spent, 3 weeks treating child amputees in Gaza has with her colleagues. You can't, Anderson Cooper just can't argue with that. So, I'm sure that CNN thought that they were inviting a nice white lady on from a medical charity, a humanitarian organization to come and say some sort of nice, meaningless words about Palestine. But she's actually used the platform that she's been given in an incredibly smart and sort of very difficult to criticize way, which is, and that's not to say that Anderson Cooper didn't have a good go at it. Shortly after you just cut the clip there, he asks her, well, okay, so if they're so brave for staying, would you have gone back? And she just says, yeah, I'd go back. She has thought about the kind of questions that she's going to be asked and the ways that they're going to try and corner her into criticizing her colleagues, into pointing to the divisions between Palestinians and Hamas. But she just completely swerves it at every turn. I think it's a really brilliant example of how to use the platform that you are given in an incredibly unjust society as a white aid worker for incredible good. I think she's an incredibly smart person.